Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Week 7 values video. Top values video, by the way, you fellas, you dirty, but clean fellas. This is what we're doing. We're going top 3 values per position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight ends, fuck the defenses. And we're going to slide right into it after you double check and make sure and secure the subscribe button. How about that one? Alrighty, let's start it off right now as the quarterbacks pop up onto the screen. And this week, the quarterbacks on a 10-game slate, right? Just 20 teams. The values, and keep in mind, value is point per dollar, bang for your buck. It does not mean cheap. People misunderstand cheap players with value players. No, value means the bang for your buck. And the value plays this week, the top 3, yeah, you're going to have to pay up for them. Now, is there some decent mid-range options? Maybe some decent cheap options. Maybe Ryan Tannehill looks okay. Maybe you want to burn your dollar Ruskies with Tua Tagovailoa or Derek Carr or Daniel Jones, who looked brutal last week. So this is why the value is going to look towards the top end. We can start with the third man here, my number 3 value, and that man's name, and if you're listening on the podcast, the top 3 values are Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Matthew Stafford in that order. Matthew Stafford is the third man on this list. And Matthew Stafford, last week he had a top 2, the number 2 ceiling projection. For me, just when you factor in what he can do from a stacking option, and similar things are coming this week. I have him projected for 23.9 fantasy points. Those 23.9 fantasy points basically drop him right around being like my 4th highest projected player. I have Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Lamar for not significantly more, but when you're comparing it to the rest of the players in the slate, a decent amount more points. But what does Stafford have working for him? Well, the fact that guys like Mahomes and Murray are on the slate, so they should be picking up a good amount of ownership. Lamar is on this slate, and ownership on Matthew Stafford probably comes in lower than it should, especially when you consider he has the highest team total, 32.5 on the slate, as a 14.5 point favorite, sure, so people just immediately run to good spot for Darrell Henderson, which is true, but if they indeed go out there and score 38 like they did last week against the Giants, there's also a decent chance Matthew Stafford is doing a thing like he did last week. Stafford is averaging over 300 yards per game passing. He is still averaging 33 attempts per game, being very efficient with an 8% touchdown rate, barely ever getting sacked. He has the lowest sack rate on this entire slate. I mean, even lower than Lamar Jackson, man, who's able to evade the rush. So Matthew Stafford is going to be somebody who has a strong matchup this week as well when you look at his matchup against Detroit. Detroit's secondary ranks dead last in the NFL this week. Their pass rush is about middle of the pack at best. It's a fine spot for him. The clear stacking options are there with Robert Woods, with Cooper Kupp, whose price point is up, but fine. So that is a number 3 value, one of the better SuperDraft. We'll build a SuperDraft lineup during this as well. One of the better SuperDraft plays in the slate. Then you go to Jalen Hurts, who Jalen Hurts is only going to have a 22.5 team implied total, but he has this very nice thing where if you see, I have a daily fantasy sports course, it's linked down below. We talk about a lot of game theory things in there. And these quarterbacks who are 3 to 6 point underdogs, but have a nice team total, right? Not a 17, not an 18, not a 19 team implied total, but a nice team total. Like Jalen Hurts on some books right now, a 23 implied team total. And you see this 23 implied team total as an underdog against Vegas, and you start to say, okay, he's going to have to throw more. For a guy already throwing 35 times per game, for a guy averaging 50 rushing yards per game, he's going to have to drop back, scramble, and throw more, which leads to fantasy points. Very quietly, Jalen Hurts is the number 5 fantasy quarterback right now. Very quietly, he has not finished outside of a top 10 finish this year, averaging over 25 fantasy points per game, and on Draftkings, 26. I have him projected for 23.4 in this matchup, and there are clear stacking options. Davante Smith, a great stacking option who will not pick up ownership, especially since this team played on the mini-bye, on the showdown slate. People don't remember that much, and when they do, he kind of let them down. Jalen Reagor, Quez Watkins, right? And then also no Zach Ertz, which helps Quez Watkins get on the field in the slot, more 3 wide receiver sets instead of the backup tight end Jack Stoll. But also Dallas Goedert is going to look really good, and we can touch on that more when we get to tight ends. And now the final man here is Lamar Jackson, and it's tough last week when 3 different running backs are getting rushing touchdowns. All the dusty veterans. Le'Veon Bell, you get a touchdown. Oprah Winfrey says you get a touchdown. Devonta Freeman, you get a touchdown, as well as Latavius Murray. That's not always going to hold up, right? We know that. And now Lamar Jackson comes into this slate, and his price point doesn't change. His price point doesn't change, even though he played well last week. Just from a fantasy perspective, he didn't. He's still throwing 32 times per game. He is still averaging 8.7 yards per attempt, and oh yeah, rushing for a slate high 65 yards per game. The connection right now is there with Mark Andrews, strong in the middle of the field. Rashad Bateman and throws a wrench into things for the upside and volume of Hollywood Brown, but he makes it a cheap stacking option as well. If you wanted to go with the Lamar this week stack with a Mark Andrews, run it back with a Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, sounds good. You want to just go Lamar because he has the rushing upside, just throw in Bateman there for some correlation if he throws a touchdown to him, and because he's so cheap, and then you want to run over to the side and go ahead and get somebody from Cincinnati, Joe Mixon, sounds good. I think Lamar looks really good this week. A 27 team implied total as a touchdown favorite in this one. It looks solid. So there is your quarterbacks. Now let's try and build out a SuperDraft lineup with the quarterback position starting first. Now at this point, many of you are actually probably familiar with SuperDraft. I played most of my action in week 6 on SuperDraft more than I did on Draftkings. I played all of my action, or for the most part, on the past showdown slate there, and I played most of my action on NBA opening night there. Now why is that? Because their contests don't fill. So here's just a quick and dirty as we start to build a lineup for you. They're gonna have a $200,000 contest, their main contest this week, $40K to first place. It's a $20 entry. Here's the beautiful thing: if you use the code SAL, you get a free $25. I know on the screen it says 20. We've now upped it to 25 if you use the code SAL. So you go to superdraft.io, you sign up. Yes, I got a code. It's SAL. Bang, an extra $25 for free to use. So take advantage of that. And the reason I'm playing more money on there is, one, the competition is easier, and built in it's easier because the contests don't fill. So this contest is going to fill at 80%, meaning that 20% of the field is going to take zeros, meaning that I beat 20% of the field just by entering a lineup. That will not happen anywhere else. Your best chance to win any money in DFS this weekend, any money at all, your best chance of winning first place, placing at all, is here because you're competing against 20 to 30% less people. So check that out. Use the code SAL for the free $20. I want to go ahead and play Ryan Tannehill this week. Now, out of the quarterbacks we just talked about, Matt Stafford looks the best. He's my highest projected SuperDraft play, but Ryan Tannehill has a higher multiplier. SuperDraft is not salary cap based. It's all about this multiplier, baby. So you multiply any of the points that Tannehill gets by 1.4x, which leaves Ryan Tannehill right now for me about a point less than Matthew Stafford. But the reason why I like that is he has a higher multiplier than Stafford significantly. So if Ryan Tannehill throws for an extra touchdown, rushes for an extra 10 yards, he's going to get 15% more points than what Matthew Stafford is going to get. And it's a way to get different as a guy who's going to be playing from behind against Kansas City. So we go there with quarterback. We'll build out the running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends as we go. But for now, let's get into the running backs as they pop up onto the screen right now. And now some of these running backs are going to look familiar because we talked about them in the first look lineup because they looked good off the bat. Now I built my projections and they still look good. In this order, as of this recording, updates will come, projections, rankings, the optimizer, Discord, all that is below. And now NBA's here with a bunch of tools for NBA as well, all included in Patreon. Come join the community. 1,000 people now over there. We love it. The community has been flourishing, so come on in. So Darrell, Henderson, Joe Mixon, and Chase Edmonds, believe it or not, in that order. Chase Edmonds against Houston as massive favorites with a huge team implied total. But let's start it off with Darrell Henderson, who we just talked about his quarterback. Yeah, you're going to look good when you have a 32.5 implied total if you're a running back as a 14.5 point favorite. We loved Darrell Henderson in last week, and what happened? Well, he ended up scoring 2 touchdowns, one in the air and one on the ground. So he kind of, it worked even better for us as he was on this list as well for the top values. But now you get a matchup against Detroit. Detroit, who is allowing the second most fantasy points to the running back position, only behind the Jets. They are the worst run defense. Not only the worst secondary, the worst run defense. This team has the worst wide receiving core that we've seen in a very long time, the worst overall defense. I mean, it's just brutal in Detroit these days. One of the worst quarterbacks in Jared Goff. Poor TJ Hawkinson, and poor. I mean, honestly, Jamal Williams, a great guy. Poor him. Poor DeAndre Swift. Poor the good players on this team. But you're getting Darrell Henderson. It's pretty obvious here. He is going to be a 14.5 point favorite with the highest team total on the slate. He is averaging 19.4 opportunities per game. But Sony Michel saw 9 touches last week. Don't worry about that at all. Those were all in garbage time when a backup quarterback was in the game. Only 2 of them were not in garbage time. You're getting 15 red zone opportunities, which right now on this slate ranks 3rd. So all the red zone work. You're getting receiving work with over 3 targets per game. Receiving touchdown last week. Over 16 attempts per game. Everything looks good here for Darrell Henderson. He projects out for me for 18.4 points and is the #1 value running back play on the slate. Joe Mixon comes up next, coming off of his best game of the year, scored basically double the points that he did in any other game since week 1, and he ended up being the running back 4 on the week last week, having 153 total yards, catching 5 passes on 6 targets, finding the end zone as well. Joe Mixon is going to look very good this week. Mixon has a positive 44% run blocking advantage against Baltimore this week. He's coming into this game as an underdog, but he still has a decent total of 21 to 22 depending on where you look. And the big thing is he's getting 21.2 opportunities per game right now. 21.2 opportunities per game. That ranks only behind the obvious one, Derrick Henry, but that's the only guy who's seeing more opportunities per game than Mixon. Yet Derrick Henry is $9,200 and deservingly so, whereas Mixon finds himself in the 6K range. Next to guys like Cordell Patterson, who's seeing 14 opportunities per game. Next to guys like Chuba Hubbard, who's seeing 15 opportunities per game. This is and obviously that's a little bit skewed, but there is a very good spot here for Joe Mixon, who projects out nicely for me. The receiving game work was great to see last week. We'll see if it holds up, especially if P. Ryan does return. And then finally, one on here that might surprise you. It's a little bit of the factor of price. The matchup is definitely skewing this upwards, but it's the 16.5 point favorite Chase Edmonds this week against Houston at 5,600. The exact same price as his teammate James Conner, who sees 14 opportunities per game, to the 13.8 for Chase Edmonds. So I expect both these guys to see some more usage this week. Now, why is Chase Edmonds more appealing? Well, that's because he's seeing 5 targets per game compared to the 0.83. That is less than 1 that James Conner is seeing per game. Conner has the upside with seeing 17 red zone touches to the 8 for Chase Edmonds, but I am expecting a lot more carries here for Chase Edmonds, not only in the second half, but in the second quarter as he's massive of a favorite. And I'm also expecting a little bit more work in the passing game than usual, just based on what you're getting out of a team total here of 32 points. The Rams have a 32.5 point team total. Basically a virtual tie for the highest on the slate is Arizona with a 32 implied team total. So Chase Edmonds, with one of the lowest percentages of 8-man and 7-man fronts in the NFL, will have soft boxes against the worst defensive line in the entire league in Houston. I mean, it's Detroit, Houston, and like Atlanta with the worst defensive lines in the league right now. It builds well for him, especially when you factor in the pass catching upside. There's a no better spot, probably on the entire season, for touchdown upside out of Chase Edmonds than this spot. So Chase Edmonds is the third best play at the value position this week as of right now, before you factor in ownership. Let's go to the running backs now. And if I talk about my highest projected running back, it's actually Chuba Hubbard, because Chuba Hubbard had a 1.65x multiplier. He looks fine on Draftkings, nothing wrong with him there, but he has a 1.65 multiplier. That multiplier is similar to players like Miles Sanders, J.D. McKissick, Jamal Williams, Devonta Freeman, right? Mark Ingram. This is like as if he's a backup, as if they're expecting McCaffrey to play, even though McCaffrey's on IR. So he's the best play this week. And then after that, another guy who's being massively disrespected is Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette is a 1.55x multiplier. This is assuming that Leonard Fournette is not the workhorse running back on his team that he has been the last 3 weeks in a top 5 to top 3 to top maybe 1 offense in the NFL. So Fournette and Chuba Hubbard not only project out as my highest projected players, but they also have high multipliers. Some other interesting options would be Chase Edmonds, Darrell Williams, Aaron Jones, Darrell Henderson, and Cordell Patterson. So there's your running backs. There's your quarterback. Again, using that code SAL. That code SAL gets you 25 free $Rooskies over on SuperDraft.io. What are you waiting for? Now, the top wide receiver values in this order are going to be Sterling Shepard, Davante Adams, and Cooper Kupp. So similar to the quarterbacks, you're paying up this week at wide receiver, probably paying up more so than at running back, because naturally, like we talked about on the first look show, it's Derrick Henry, and then no McCaffrey, and then maybe you want to pay for Aaron Jones, who's somewhat expensive, and then it's just a drop off to the 6K range. So there's really no real ways to pay up if you're not paying for Henry for the most part this week. So it naturally allows you to pay up a quarterback, naturally allows you to pay up a wide receiver. And we can start with that third guy on this list, who is going to be Mr. Cooper Kupp, who is just the leading scorer in fantasy in anything, whether it's point per games on DraftKings, whether it's your season-long league. You're getting right now Cooper Kupp looking like an absolute superstar. Cooper Kupp right now is averaging 11.3 targets per game, 33.5 of his team's air yard market share, and he's averaging 109 yards per game, let alone the fact that he's got like 7 touchdowns on the season. 12 red zone targets right now leads the NFL. A 36.4% red zone target share. I mean, last year Davante Adams led the league with a 42%, and we know how that went, right? And even him missing about 2.5 to 1.5 games. So Cooper Kupp is looking dynamite right now. He's my highest projected wide receiver as it stands. I currently have Cooper Kupp right now for 24.8 fantasy points, a half a point more because of that high team total than Davante Adams as of this recording. So Kupp looks great. You can stack him with Matthew Stafford. Expect there to be ownership even at this price point. And if there is enough ownership there, well, then you can pivot from Davante Adams. Adams, who sees a price reduction of $100, but Adams, who still looks really fucking good because, look, last week you're facing Chicago on the road, a division matchup. The first game that the Packers offensive line is actually going to be pressured with all these backups in. And what happens? Davante Adams has a pedestrian game, could have had a touchdown. He barely stepped out, would have been a 30-yard touchdown, so it could have been a much better game, but has a pedestrian game. What does he get now? The Packers offensive line still has this matchup, right, against Washington in their defensive front, which is concerning, but he gets a much softer secondary, just a much overall softer secondary, especially on the outside, let alone the middle of the field. So Davante Adams' upside for the projections that he continues to throw out there of double-digit targets. So far this season right now, Davante Adams averaging 11 targets per game, only behind Cooper Kupp, averaging 111 yards per game ahead of Cooper Kupp, and a 23% red zone target share. And that number, if you just take it for wide receivers, is closer to a 70% red zone target share at the wide receivers and tight ends. Aaron Jones is actually, and also A.J. Dillon, taking a couple of that target share and a little bit too much of it away, we would say, but it's a small sample. So Davante Adams, my second highest projected play right now. Better play on SuperDraft, though, because you actually get a multiplier. You get a 1.1x multiplier in Davante Adams, which you rarely ever get. And then the number one value play in the slate sees his price only come up like 11%. He was $5K last week. week. It's Sterling Shepard. He's now $5,600. Kadarius Toney is not expected to play. Saquon Barkley is not expected to play. Darius Slayton and Kenny Golladay are banged up and questionable. So right now you get Sterling Shepard coming off of a 14-target game, having this matchup against Carolina, who doesn't have a Shaq Thompson on defense, who doesn't have a J.C. Horn, their rookie, who was looking fantastic. You're getting him with a 78% catch percentage, averaging 9 targets per game. And that's with him leaving a game with injury, coming off of that 14-target game. Everything looks good for him. 15.6 fantasy points might even be low. Everything is hard not to like here. I expect heavy ownership to come in on Sterling Shepard. I like him a lot. I don't really feel the need to stack this game up to get to him. Just play him as a one-off option. And as we build out some of the wide receivers, you have to pick 3. I'll give you 2 here that I like. I like Sterling Shepard. We just talked about him. He's my 3rd highest projected play on SuperDraft at the wide receiver position, but he has a high multiplier, 1.55x, which means he'll continue to go higher when guys ahead of him have a lower multiplier in the 1.1 range, like a Tyreek Hill and Davante Adams. The second guy is a sneaky guy. Now, bear with me here. This is going to be a little risky, but it's a sneaky player because he has a 1.9x multiplier. Right now, Rondale Moore for me projects out as my 12th highest projected SuperDraft play, but if he just scores 2 more points, he'll be in the top 5. If he scores 3 more points because you multiply it by almost 2x, he'll be the highest scoring play for me. I currently have him 4 points behind Tyreek Hill, who is my highest projected SuperDraft play, but Rondale Moore has a significantly higher multiplier. The multiplier they gave Rondale Moore at 1.9x is as if he steps on the field like for 5 snaps a game. He's running 20 routes now in this offense, and he's dynamic, and he's touching the ball in the rushing game as well. So Rondale Moore, you would have to pick another wide receiver, a flex option, but we'll give you a tight end. Again, big advantage here, limited time offer. Take the code SAL on superdraft.io, build this type of line about, play around with where you want to, especially if you're one of the 1,000 patrons, which some of you definitely are watching this. You have the projections to play around with it. And now we get into the tight end position, which is the most fun position, or the most fun time tight end has been all season long, because we have good players on there now with nice prices. We have people changing up teams. Zach Ertz goes to a new team. That leaves some behind for Dallas Goedert. We have Kyle Pitts, who's coming off of the bye, and we haven't seen him since he balled out in London. We still have Travis Kelce and Darren Waller, whose price point continues to reduce because of his struggles on the slate. Mark Andrews is playing well. This is the most exciting tight end slate, right? Ricky Seals-Jones is still going to be out there balling out, hopefully, right? But getting usage, running all these routes, leading all tight ends the last 2 weeks in routes run with Logan Thomas still on IR. Gronk might come back. This is the most fun we've seen a tight end slate. So here's my tight end values. Dallas Goedert, Kyle Pitts, and Darren Waller in that order of the top value plays. And I don't have to tell you why Dallas Goedert looks good. Dallas Goedert's price point does not come up even though Zach Ertz is not out there. Here's the thing. I hate to break it to you. Jack Stoll is not going to be playing the Zach Ertz role, right? Whether it's because they wanted to trade Zach Ertz or he's just a better player. Jack Stoll, now the backup tight end on the Eagles, is not going to be running 20 to 25 routes a game like Zach Ertz. Now, Quez Watkins is probably going to see a lot more of that usage in 3 wide receiver sets, but that still keeps Dallas Goedert on the field. So if Goedert now see his routes go from 24 to 30, or even if they don't jump up that much, but he's more of a priority in the offense, especially around the red zone, where so far this year Dallas Goedert already has 5 red zone attempts or 5 red zone targets, it's going to start to look really good for Dallas Goedert, who's already a big factor of this offense, who's already seeing a 79% catch rate. 3.7 yards of separation is top 5 on the slate out of any tight end, and you're getting these air yards per reception that are some of the tops in the league. So Dallas Goedert looks like a strong play. Probably my favorite play, though, is going to be Kyle Pitts. I want to see how owned Kyle Pitts ends up coming in. He's just missing being my top value play. You're getting Kyle Pitts off of that game where Calvin Ridley is questionable this week, but you're getting Kyle Pitts off of that London game where he finally showed you why they took him so high. He's seeing over 7 targets per game now, 26% of his team's air yard market share, which right now is the highest on the slate of head of Darren Waller, head of Travis Kelce. He's being used as a wide receiver 75% of the time. We're getting to pay for the wide receiver 1B on this team behind Calvin Ridley with probably more red zone upside, and we only have to pay $5,900. Like, we love Sterling Shepard this week because we get to pay $5,600 for a wide receiver 1 in a team going to see 10 plus targets. Calvin Ridley, if he misses, even if he's playing though, you're getting a similar value here in Kyle Pitts because he's disguised as a tight end for $5,900, even though he's going to be running similar amount of routes, especially out of the slot, as a guy like Sterling Shepard on the Giants will this week. So it's a really nice spot, having for almost 15 fantasy points. And then lastly, you get Darren Waller, who I know a lot of people are down on, but he continues to finish as a top 12 tight end every single week. He had 11 fantasy points last week, not good. I know he had 26.5 week 1. Since then, his best finish is 15, but then he's got 12, 10, and 11. So again, the tight end position stinks. You need more than 10 out of him at this price point. I have him for 16.8. We're still going to give him the target share out there of close to 25% and the red zone target share. Twice this year, one time he stepped out of bounds on a touchdown, and the other time it was just overthrown by Derek Carr. So he's right there for these 20-point finishes still. He's still getting the volume out there with targets so far in these games of 19 that one game on Monday Night Football to start the season, and then 7, 7, 7, 8, and 5 with a red zone target in every single one of his games, at least one red zone target. So these things are going to start to slowly come around for him. In this matchup, I do indeed like it. That's Darren Waller, the 3rd tight end value. Now, other guys, and we can pull it up right now over on SuperDraft, that I would like to put into the consideration for the tight end play this week. There are players like Darren Waller. There are players like Tyler Higbee. There are players like Dallas Goedert and Travis Kelce and Mike Gesicki, but we already talked about him today, and none other than, come on down, Mr. Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts right now has an insane multiplier of 1.6x. 1.6x. For reference, other players with a 1.6 or close multiplier, Robert Tonyan doing nothing this year. Zach Ertz going to a new team. Evan Ingram, nowhere near the type of player. Hunter Henry, nowhere near the type of player in upside as Kyle Pitts has in his offense. OJ Howard has a similar multiplier, right? This is ridiculous. He is my highest projected tight end by 3 points over on SuperDraft, and he has this high multiplier. Play Kyle Pitts on SuperDraft this week. Don't overthink it. Probably play him on Draftkings this week. There's your top values per position. Get in on SuperDraft right now. The contest will not fill, and you get a free $25 a limited time offer using the code SAL. It's all linked up down below. SuperDraft.io. You make the account. Use the code SAL. Bam. There you go. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Videos dropping every day. Final thoughts on Friday. Saturday, that one dude, and Sunday, the live stream. So before you go, all I ask from you is to secure, gently caress the like button and secure, double check, and make sure that you are subscribed to this here YouTube channel. You all rock, and I'll see you in the next one.